Hello, hello, hello. This is Cortina Jackson, and you are listening to What's on Cortina Jackson's Mind. Today, I have a very special guest that I'm so honored to introduce to some and present to others. Oh, you guys, I'm very excited. I have world renowned artist, Mr. Don Cincone. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I am wonderful. I'm wonderful. I'm excited. And I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much for being here. It is really quite an honor indeed. Your work is fascinating. It's found worldwide and
Yes.
in places in Europe, even some museums in Europe, and just all over. Gosh, it was even featured in a movie called a 1964 five movie called The Art of Love, and I really want to hear about some more of that. I'm sure you're going to tell us about that later. But
Okay.
first of all, I believe myself that God speaks, through various ways. I feel like He speaks through nature. Sometime when I look at the beauty of the rain or just different things in nature, sometimes I really do cry. I just feel moved and I feel compelled. So I can really feel God through nature. I I
Yes.
I think we hear from God through music and songs and dance. And I say all this because I when I look at your paintings, I know God speaks through you and speaks through your art. And so the beauty of God through what you do is really, I can feel God. I can feel the closeness to God. And so it really is quite astounding, how that moves us. And I know you'll speak on that. So we want to hear, gosh, all about you. You're an artist that paints whatever you feel, which I believe is God as well. So I want you to tell us how it all began for you. You back in your humble beginnings, back in Alto, Louisiana, because God spoke to you, I believe, at a very young age. Please, sir, the floor is all yours. We want to hear all about you.
Well, I did grow up the first 7 years of my life near a town called Alto, Louisiana, northeast Louisiana. That's in Richland Parish. And my parents were sharecroppers, and we lived in at least four sharecropper houses that I remember during that time. And later on, after we were not living there, it occurred to me that all of those sharecropper houses had names, but they did not have the name of my father. It seems that the names of those sharecropper houses were for the last head of the family that had lived in those houses. So I remember those houses, like the Sammy Jackson house, the Lynn Best house, and the Sam Wilmore house. And it was that kind of lifestyle that we lived. And the school that I attended was a one-room schoolhouse, two teachers, 7 grades. When school began each year, it would begin actually in the month of September, but only small kids would be there at that time. Little fellows, as I was, I don't really remember when I began school, and that's because there weren't any daycare centers, no one to keep the kids. Mothers and grandmothers were picking cotton. So little kids went to school with the siblings that were not large enough to pick cotton still. So that's where it began for me. And the great thing about that, lending itself to the arts, was art was esteemed very highly in that school.
Hmm.
Um, Drawing, but more so singing and drama. Those were the at the forefront of all of that. And each of our days began with that singing of Negro spirituals and gospels and patriotic songs. And when we actually went to work in those days, writing as it's, I'm told now that it's called cursive, and we made all of these loops and all kinds of marks. And the incredible thing about that is that probably became the basic skill in terms of training my hands and my eyes to coordinate to the degree that all I have to do is want to do it, not even think about doing it. My hands just do it. So coming out of that kind of environment, being encouraged greatly by my mother and my father and four grandparents. I was always in all of their homes, lots of aunts and uncles. I'm an only child at that time. And in time, my parents moved from there to Monroe, Louisiana. Um, and I enrolled in that school system. And the exciting thing about coming to that school was there were numbers of boys who drew. In fact, some of them had their own cartoon series, and it continued weekly. Um, I had been struggling for a long time to draw my grandfather's A model Ford. Um, First, I remember trying that when I was about 3. I took my position at a profile and drew a pretty good profile in my thinking of that A model. And when I began to try to draw um, what was there, not what I really saw. I couldn't really see the top, but I tried to draw the top, couldn't see many parts of it. I tried to draw all of those parts. All of those parts stood up as if when you take a box,
Hmm.
cardboard box apart, and it flattens out, you got all these um, rectangular pieces that are just flat shapes. That's what my drawing looked like.
Hmm.
And it was as if the drawing was conspiring against me, but I kept trying and I struggled from that point of 3 until we came to Monroe, and I was watching one of my classmates, George Jackson. He drew a car that looked like a car. And I stood there and watched in amazement. And I got my pencil and paper and mimicked every line that George made. And sure enough, I drew a car that looked like a car, but I didn't understand how it was done. That was the beginning of a very deep search that took me from there to understanding that there were some principles behind that. And before, or rather, at the very end of elementary school, graduating from 8th grade, that same summer, I had finally won the Draw Me contest that was in most magazines in those days for the
Hmm.
Minneapolis, our famous artists course. And my parents enrolled me in it, and I learned a tremendous amount from some of the best illustrators in this country. I went from there to high school. High school did not have an art department for the visual arts. In fact, I don't know of any high school in North Louisiana that did have a visual arts teacher, but all of them, especially Carroll High, had two of the best music teachers in the country.
Hmm.
And so we love the arts. And my principal um, put together a group of sponsors for all the boys that love to draw and paint. Now, the strange thing of all of this, in those days, I do not know of a single girl that drew anything other than struggle to draw their assignments when we had assignments, and most of them came to me to draw them for them.
Wow.
Yeah. So all of that came out of that. There was also a competition statewide, and the first year that we won that competition, I was one of those winners. Went to Southern University near Baton Rouge in a little town called Scotlandville. All of our work was disqualified. And when we came back on the day to um, see who had won all of the blue ribbons, and we had won none, and our works were not even exhibited. We were mortified, and
Right.
finally they told us that we were disqualified because, in their um, wisdom, no high school kids could draw and paint at that level. So
Hmm.
we were disqualified. So this is the humble beginning of
Goodness.
my development of the visual arts, drawing, painting.
Wow. How I'm sure, that would be crushing to anyone, but your your resilience to proceed, you didn't take that. That would be very disheartening. And their only reason for disqualifying is just they just couldn't believe that that kids could have done this, that you guys could have actually pulled this off
Yeah.
and was disqualified.
Hmm.
So, what a blow. What a blow to go through this. But you wouldn't be Mr. Cincone if you didn't keep going. You did not stop. So you had that to happen to you. You went on to enroll in college and um and realized even there that the most you could ever be was a teacher.
Yeah.
And so, wow, tell us about that and what led you to now move on. What allowed you to move from where you were, realizing that this is it, to I need to go beyond what is
Hmm.
offered.
Um, that second crush,
Hmm.
if you will, um, I I had nothing against being an art instructor. Um, in fact, I love my art instructors whom I was studying under. But when I was told that's what I was there to learn to become, and that was never in my mind at any time to be an art instructor, uh,
Hmm.
even though I became one. But what I wanted to do was to paint. And if and I saw that the instructors there were not doing work, in some instances not as well as I was when I arrived there. And
Hmm.
so I walked away, came home. um, my parents were devastated, and they didn't say much,
Mm.
and I certainly didn't. And my hopes were at that point of finding the school that I could go to and learn to become a painter. And by this time, I had found a great relationship with God,
Mm.
um, and was filled with the Holy Spirit and walked in his counsel. And when I was coming home one night from church and crossing my grandmother's yard, who was her yard house was 1 yard away from my parents, I heard within, join the army.
Mm.
And I looked up and I'm thinking, I don't want to join the army. I didn't even join the ROTC when I was at and I heard it again. I had learned by that time that to
Mm.
follow that inspiration. And the next day, I went to the recruiting station, joined up, and was accepted. And in time, after I finished extensive training as a medic, uh,
Mm.
combat medic, as well as a hospital technician, um, I was sent to Europe near Stuttgart. And during about a year after I was in Stuttgart, I got a very similar unction to create a course of study. And with me not really knowing what that meant by no means, um, I hesitated, but was constantly inspired to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the course of study was to go travel throughout Europe, go to those places where master artists had lived and worked, and many of their paintings could still be seen. The great architects all over Europe, everywhere you look, that was evidence right there in that Stuttgart area. And I began with Denmark, and not knowing of any Danish painters, I did see some wonderful work. But in Denmark, what I came full abreast with was storytelling.
Mm.
People like Hans Christian Andersen and many of the other writers like that even went to the castle supposedly where um, uh, the Hamlet story was set in
Wow.
Shakespeare drew from. And while we were on a tour of the Big Island, where Copenhagen is, a young tour guide was telling how the North Sea came to be. And when I was listening to him tell that story, it was the same story my mother had told me when I was a small boy, and her father had told her when she was a small girl. And his father, who was a slave, had
Mm.
told him that story. The only difference was the names of the character and the setting of the scene, but the story was the same story.
Wow. Oh.
Now, I'm at story now because story was being revealed to me as the catalyst for my study. And not then, but in time, I began to understand that art is a story. A few minutes ago, when you mentioned your belief with regards to me and the origin of my inspiration, it's coming from God.
Hmm.
The the story is the first art form. Genesis 1 through 5. Genesis 1, in the beginning, God
Hmm.
created. That's story. Without the story in the book of Genesis, there is no creation. There is no story there. And if there is no story, there is no language, there is no communication of any kind. There is what is described in the very second verse of that story, the void, the nothingness. And it's with this nothingness that God creates everything that is created. So here begins the inspiration coming from God with the resource of all of the arts. Nothing, nothing.
Hmm.
We are empowered to create out of the nothingness of the human mind.
Oh goodness. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? How with that nothingness and we're like everything beautiful that we see and all of these creations, yes, came directly from that stillness with God and giving that inspiration and hearing Him just creates everything beautiful that we see. And you have done that by truly being yourself, because you were inspired by a lot of what you saw in Rembrandt and some of these greats. They had their own technique and their own style, but you were able to develop your technique. You were able to hear that God, hear that that uh, the beginning, the I am, and you were able to create and just really made it your own. We see Rembrandt, we know who Rembrandt is but when we see Cincone, we know Cincone, and we really feel that. It's just a wow in itself. It's just it's very moving. Um, the way that you have put God first in everything, just beautiful.
That, well, God is first. Whether we try to place him anywhere or not, he's still there. But the going to the part of style, the style that is the identity of all artists. The day that I left the area of alto, my mother and I went by a dear friend's house. We call her Miss Stell,
Hmm.
beautiful lady. And before, rather, as we were leaving, um, I was not aware that my grandmother, Lily, was moving to Monroe. My grandmother did this secretly, and that's another story. Um, but Miss Stell and my mom knew, and Miss Stell hugged me like she never had before. And she always hugged me and kissed me. And this time she said to me, Donald Ray, be yourself.
Hmm.
And I thought in that very moment, what are you talking about, Miss Steph? Be yourself. How can I be anyone else? I'm me. And but that did not satisfy as an answer. And
Hmm.
it didn't satisfy and it didn't go away. It stayed with me, even at Southern. One of the first assignments in orientation was to write a paper on my philosophy of life. All of that whole bunch of freshmen was required to write that, and we
Yes.
made that feeble attempt to do it. None of us came close, and then our instructor did a lecture on it, and it began to open out what the concept of a philosophy of life um, is pushing toward. So it was that constant hearing that be yourself, be yourself. My style in time came out of that drive that stayed with me. Be yourself. The incredible thing about this is being yourself is in each one of us from the beginning. And everything that we do, the way that we do it, that's our style. So, but we learn all that we learn from other people. So we are the great mimickers. We mimic everything. The fact that you and I are communicating now, it's because we've become pretty good at this. And so that suffices. But the way in which you communicate, others communicate, such a conversation as we are having now, there is a definite style, the way Katrina Jackson does this beautiful thing that she does. Therein lies style.
Hmm.
To talk that is one thing. To do that with your hands, or to do that with music or dance, or many, many other things, is something else different again. So it's in order for that to happen, it not only requires constant practicing, whatever it is you're doing, you must listen
Hmm.
inwardly to know what it is that is your style. And style alerts you to its presence in what you're doing through the feeling. You feel this. When I began to feel this, and my work took on a definite identity, that was Cincone.
Goodness. Wow. Wow. You spoke of technique and these different things that these different aspects that you use. Um, I read something. Tell me about because sometimes people think it's merely setting up a canvas, feeling the moment, painting, but it's almost down to a science. The way that you explain how mathematics was involved and
Mm-hmm.
um, even the golden means where the four corners, everything is with such precision to bring out the artistic creation of things we see. We don't even realize that it's such um, it's such down to a science on how these things come about. Tell us a little bit about that, how as you studied some of these and developed your technique, the math behind it. I found that fascinating, and the colors, how you know. I, please tell, because I don't even want to tell the story. This is just, it's fascinating because, like I said, you just think I'm just gonna stand there and draw, but it's really quite profound.
Yeah, the math idea related to visual arts seems unbelievable, and there is no relationship. Um, it would also seem that science as related to visual arts, no relationship to any of that. I contend that art, hear me now, art is the paradigm of all disciplines. Every discipline that now exists because of art,
Hmm.
not the other way around. Art is not something kids study in school for enrichment. It does enrich indeed, but it's on a par with every other subject that we deem to be much higher regarded, necessary, but not the arts.
Hmm.
Without the arts, picture it now. Picture this. Sometimes I do this when I'm talking to high school kids, trying to get them to sense what power is at their grasp, their fingertips. Think about it. What would exist if there were no artists?
Gosh, that you're nothing. You're
Yeah,
everything has that basis. Wow.
yeah, nothing. You the language, the language, the books, the ordering of the book, the print, putting the book together, all of the crafts that are involved in this, all of the engineering, the thought behind the engineering, all of the math that's in this, behind all of these things. They would not have had the characters to hold that idea, to transfer that idea in a solid way to be passed on from generation to generations, where minds in one generation unite with minds in another generation, unite with minds in another one, even down to the time to where we are right now. Nothing would be without the arts. You couldn't even drive to work. What side of the road would you stay on? How would you go from one city to another without all of the signs, the lines that are down the middle of the road, the warning signs, the curves? All of these things come out of some area of the arts.
Wow.
So why not math? And the great blessing of joining the army and being sent to Europe and then being inspired to start this course of study of, and I like to call it in searching to become, uh, to understand the art of painting. The starting in Denmark, I traveled from north to south, from Denmark to Holland, northern Germany, throughout Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Zurich, down into Italy on the west side, and then came back up on the east side to the area of Stuttgart and traversed a lot of that more than one time. And you impact it with the move of art, the move of oil painting, and painting concepts merging from the southern part coming out of Egypt, Mesopotamia, into the Byzantine, into what we remember as the height of all of that, the Great Renaissance, and on into the modern masters of the Impressionists to the abstractionists that we deal with today. It's much of that, those that sought it and they did it at that particular time. It was developed around mathematical formulas. When you mention the golden means, that is that encompassing move that is there, and everything that we're creating, and it moves in that spiral. And it's my belief that God created all that he created in the circle. This moves in this circle like a snail shell, and when you lay that imaginative form on a rectangular canvas, it orders the canvas, the four corners are speaking to you. There's a dynamic that's already at work on just the blank canvas. Some people say, well, the most frightening thing for me as a painter is to stand before the white canvas. The most exciting thing is to stand before that canvas and listen to it, listen to the movement going from your eyes going from one corner to the other, transverse and in all kinds of directions. Now, here you have this scramble, you have this chaos, which the scholars of the Bible say God had on hand. Imagine God having a chaos. This chaos was God's resource. So this scramble of lines, the dynamics that are already self-existent by virtue of the fact that this rectangular image has movement. It is not inert. It is not dead. It's alive. But when the human hand moved from that point to depicting something here, now you must be disciplined enough to understand the order. It's within the context of that order that formulas in math that could be repeated are repeatable. Same kind of thinking is involved with color. Colors can be sent by our computer now, the formula anywhere in the world, and the person receives it in a mathematical formula, and they put it together and get whatever mixture of paint they're looking for. So all of this is involved in painting, and because I was blessed enough to become a soldier, and my great country sent me to Europe, I learned what I could never have learned anywhere else.
Wow, that is extraordinary and very true. You know, when you I know that the day that you said you were walking and you heard that voice to join the army, and you were thinking, why would I do that? But had you not had that experience, you wouldn't have seen the things, that you saw. It was for you to go, so that you can just see the beauty of all of this and see um, the different artists and the different arts, that you got the opportunity to see. And just, wow, just everything was a culmination of what grew you as, just a wonderful artist. And what people will definitely notice in your art is the color. So much color, flowers, the lines, the I think I read somewhere you said you use between 7 to 15 million colors. Is this correct? Did I read that correct?
Yeah, that blows your mind, doesn't
That
it?
it
Now,
truly
actually, I
does.
don't use but three
Oh,
colors. That's all you're looking at. It's the interaction and the relationship of the
wow.
colors and the approach to laying it on the canvas that, and I had no idea of this until my son John, who broke all this stuff down on the computer, um, and he told me one day what he found and all how many colors was involved in a single
Wow.
area of a painting, and that blew my mind too. But it's all done from three colors. You just looking, all the stuff you see behind me are three colors: red, yellow, and blue. And then you have the mixing of those, the values of those, the overlaying of those, um, and the light that's playing against those.
Wow. Wow. That is mind-boggling. That is really something. Oh, just beautiful work. Beautiful. As I mentioned earlier, your art was seen in the movie, The Art of Love.
Yeah.
Now
Mhm.
tell us about this story, because it was featured in such a, for them to choose your paint. Tell us the story of how that was even chosen, how that came about. Um, I think it's just so important, and a little bit of, what were you able to have that ha- tell the story before I give it away, because I'm going to end up giving away actually what happened with this art, later on.
Mhm. The that story is a long story. Uh, I've written about it in my memoir, and hopefully it'll be published before the end of this year. But it really begins with my wife, my first wife, who's now deceased, Catherine. We moved from Long Island, New York, where I was working in the city of New York as a fashion designer. And we decided to move back to the West Coast, uh, largely because of the weather and largely because of a lot of other things that we like better in California. So we went to Los Angeles. And when we arrived in Los Angeles, we knew no one. And when I tried to get into that fashion industry, I was barred from the fashion industry in Los Angeles because I'm Black. And,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't ashamed to let me know that very factor. Um, I couldn't find a job doing anything for the most part, being a medical tech. I could walk off of hospital jobs onto another hospital job. All of the hospitals in that Los Angeles area, I never got a job.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to shorten this story. My wife collected pennies. She was had this a tremendous collection of pennies when we were dating, and she showed me that collection one time, and jokingly I asked her, "Why, you collecting pennies? Why don't you collect 50-cent pieces or quarters, or at least?"
Right.
And I kind of laughed at her. She didn't think it was funny. She let me know she loved pennies. Well, we had got down very close to where Catherine's pennies was between us and dropping off the face of the earth. It was during that time, again, the leading of the Holy Spirit. With tears in my eyes, I heard, "Go back to the apartment, park your car, and walk where I tell you."
Hmm.
And I walked, and I walked, and I walked. Well, to shorten the story, um, I came to a boutique that was owned by a young black dressmaker. And I told her my story about being a designer, showed her some proof of that. And she was so excited. And then she dropped the bomb on me. She couldn't hire me. Um, and we
Hmm.
were we liked each other immediately. So, and we could talk the same language. In the course of that conversation, she said, "I'm going to ask you something, and I hope you don't get angry with me." And I said, "Okay, ask." She said, "Can you paint houses?" "Yeah, I've been painting houses since I was a kid." She gave me the name of a paint store and told me that that was a private store and they sent people out to paint houses. And some of this you're going to have to read my memoir. I did that, and it came that I was sent to a realtor. A realtor sent me to her house. I was told again by the Holy Spirit how much to bid. I got it. I not only wound up painting the exterior of that house, I put a roof on it, remodeled the kitchen and other things that was in that house. During that time, another young man, unemployed, came by and asked if I needed any help.
Hmm.
And so he helped me, and I got ready to pay him. He said, I don't charge anything. I just wanted to help you. I wasn't doing nothing, and just wanted to help. So we joined together, and that grew. We could support our families. One of those jobs that we were sent to by a realtor was a portrait painter.
Hmm.
And I did the interiors, he did the exteriors, then we reversed it. Anyway, during the course of conversation with the lady, she found I was a painter, and she introduced me to an agency on La Cienega Boulevard. He looked at three of my paintings. He rejected those three paintings three times. And finally I got it right. And he we sat down and talked a deal. It was out of that setting
Hmm.
that Ross Hunter, the producer with Universal Studios, saw my work in his gallery. Ross Hunter had looked for artists in the Los Angeles area, San Francisco, New York, and Paris, and not found what he was looking for. But when he saw my work, he knew that's what it was. He chose my work over 350 other artists that were working with that same agency.
Wow. Wow.
And I did 85 paintings and drawings that are used in the motion picture called The Art of Love, starring Dick Van Dyke, James Garner, Elke Sommers, Angela Dixon, and Ethel Merman. Um, I got no credits, none, not even a blip.
Oh.
Yeah, but in the end, and I never remember this movie maker's name, is a black movie maker back in the 20s, and I hope I think of it before we end this.
Hmm.
Uh, he knew all about that because he was also a part of it, caught up in it. He then started to collect the works of movies that blacks had had a part in that and received no credits. And he collected that. When he passed on, his family um, taught with the University of Southern California. Uh, my work was included in that. It is presently archived in the University of Southern California. So my credits, I have far better credits now because of that, not the Universal Studios, but that
Right.
University of Southern California.
Oh. Oh, that's wonderful. I love that story. I really love that story. Um, and was so glad that, that that's the way that ended because a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of Black people did not get credit, not just, in this sense, but just a lot of areas where credit was definitely due. And to this day, still have, is not, unless it's talked about or someone brings it up. Unfortunately, a lot of our children don't know their history and know about these things that, we've just lost sight of. And I was so glad to hear that your work, that there was that producer
Mm-hmm.
who was able to archive that work. And
Yes.
yes,
And,
wonderful.
and during that, he even commissioned me to do a personal work for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Now, you have a lot of, for those who are on the podcast, you can't see this, but you have a lot of beautiful art behind you. But I'll
Yes.
tell you, one piece that I love, and I don't see it there, but I think it's called Standing on Their Shoulders or Standing.
Yes.
I love this piece because it really shows the perseverance in the different the men and women that you have put in this piece. Tell us a little bit about that piece.
Well, that particular painting grew out of a tribute to Grambling State University.
Ah,
Yeah, and which is right down the road from where I am now. Uh,
wow.
and it began with Booker T. Washington commissioning Mr. Adams, Charles P. Adams, to come to Grambling, Louisiana, and start this less than a university or college, probably not much more than a decent high school that became Grambling State University. And in time, buildings on that campus took on the names of the many of the people that are in that painting.
Hmm.
So that's how I selected several of those persons that are in that painting, like Harriet Tubman Hall, and Charles P. Adams, one of them, and many, many others
Hmm.
are in there. And when I began to formulate the idea, I was reading a book called The African Genius.
Hmm.
And In this book, there's a story told about a spider named Annis. And Annis went all over the world. And as she traveled, she saw how humans devalued wisdom. And it made her so angry, she decided to go all over the world again with a gourd and take all of the wisdom and put it in a gourd and bring it back to Africa. And she did. And she climbed the highest tree in all of Africa. And when she got to the top of that tree to lash that gourd to the top of the tree with her web, a violent wind blew the gourd out of her grasp, and it crashed on the ground. And the wind blew the wisdom all over the world again. In this painting, the math that we talk about, I created a spider web in lines. The whole painting is framed on this spider web. And in the middle of that spider web is a tiger, that mascot of Grambling State University. You're looking down on the back of the tiger, and the head of the tiger is facing you. The movement in it is across the top of it, showing the dawn of civilization. Original man rising up out of Africa, crossing all of the continents of the world and various diverse human forms, and the wisdom of each generation going with them. And the pyramids are accented on, as you look at the piece on the left side, top upper left corner. Then came the time of great darkness, slavery, the enslavement of our African ancestors. So we show that tangled web across the Atlantic, and climbing up out of the Atlantic is the nude body of a Black woman. And then out of that is a Union soldier, Black soldier, climbing just beyond her, up to Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, all the way down through to President Charles P. Adam, and Prez, as we call him, Jones. And finally, we get to the wonderful women that were in this are Rosa Parks and Bethune, Dr. Bethune. And the very forefront is Dr. Martin Luther King. The connecting the story to the imagery. Every person in that group has a gourd. And that gourd is placed on the shoulder of the person in front of them, all the way down to Dr. King. But Dr. King is holding a kerosene lamp. The lamp that I drew from when I was a small boy, laying on the floor, get my homework with a kerosene lamp. He's holding the kerosene lamp. Now, all of them that full figured are barefooted.
Hmm.
And they are barefooted because of where their feet are placed. Their feet are on the shoulders of cotton pickers, cane cutters, washwomen, all of the mundane work that our people have done, and many instances still are doing, that others of us are given the opportunity to go to school and to learn and to make contributions to the whole world. So they are all standing on shoulders. Now, that would seem to be the end of this painting. When President Barack Obama
Mm-hmm.
was showing signs that he could win, and I was excited when he was in our that he could win. I wanted to do a painting of it.
Hmm.
And nothing came. Nothing came. All through the time that he was running, nothing came. It wasn't until shortly after he became president of the United States, I was listening. I probably should say I overheard Michelangelo on someone's program, and Michelangelo said, President Obama was standing on many people's shoulders. My painting was already named Standing on Shoulders, and it hit me. This is where he should be. And when I went to the painting and looked at it, there's no space for
Hmm.
it. And I'm thinking, this is where he should be. So there's no space. So I took it in the room where, in the den, where my wife, Catherine, and my grandson, Philip, and my daughter, Dawn, youngest daughter, were watching that program. And I told them that I'm led to put President Obama in this painting, but there's no space for him. You see any place you think he could go? So my grandson and my daughter, they were like me. And my wife said it's only one place he could be. Now, this is the same lady that I had the nerve to tell one day she didn't know anything about art. Um,
Right.
I said, where? And she put her finger on the only space in the painting that would accommodate his full face. It was as if the space was intentionally left there for him. So I incorporated President Barack Obama into that painting.
Oh my gosh. So much. Oh, there's just so much in that painting. I knew I loved it for a reason. I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. And the story, hearing the story behind these paintings are just overwhelming. For those who are listening, you've got to see them because they're more than just looking at them. It really does tell a story. And then when you hear the story behind them, it is just quite fascinating. It is quite fascinating. That is just, oh my gosh, that has overwhelmed me. I know it may be hard, but is there a painting or a piece that I don't even know how to put this, that you really are drawn to, that you may have liked more than the other, or may have felt something, or are they all in their own special way? Do you have a favorite?
The, the that question has been asked of me many times,
Mm,
and from the beginning, um, I was a parent, and the answer that I gave and still do give, it's like asking me which one of my children
mm-hmm.
do I love the most, and I have an answer for that. And the answer for that is the one that needs me the most now.
Mm. Oh, wow. Wow. Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, it's hard, it would be hard for me to say I like one more than the other because they all really truly speak in different ways. I love Mama Sally's house,
Yeah.
just because it just even looking at that reminds me of here in Texas we have my mom grew up in a place called Rawls, and
Mhm.
they had these houses that was very similar, and so the setup just it almost makes you just daydream and think about things that you've seen and hearing mama and how everyone grew up together and the shotgun houses, everything was just
Yeah. Hmm.
yes, yes. And so you really just feel each painting and almost get lost in them, just almost get lost in them and dream. Oh, I love it, I love it. Well, I'll tell you, you have really been blessed. You have been blessed with such an anointing that we get to experience through your work. And for that, we are so grateful. We're so grateful that you have let the Lord use you in such a wonderful way.
Well, we are so grateful, and that there are so many people that have helped us all along the way. And we especially thank you for this privilege to talk with you, um, and part of your wonderful work that you are doing.
Oh, bless you. The pleasure is all mine. I'm just so very honored. Now please tell us, do you have anything upcoming? Anything coming up for you?
Uh, what we are uh, terminating now is work that we are doing. The Arts Council in this area received a grant from the Arts and Humanities of the state of Louisiana and the National Arts of Humanities for me to do an oral presentation of um, many of the paintings that I've done that are in this general area. And we had a year to do this. We started it last November, I think it was. And so we've done like seven uh, video sessions of this, and we will probably do two more.
Oh,
And
wow.
um, one small section of that, I think it's like 15 minutes, will be in the Library of Congress.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. How can people contact you? Um, any websites or any way that people can contact you?
Yeah, we have had previous website, and we took it down and we rebuilt it, and it's being launched almost immediately. It'll probably be up in the next couple of weeks. So you can get that by simply going to doncincone.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I hope to I'm really going to keep up with you so I can maybe come to one of those presentations. You only have two. So I'm hoping.
We are actually working on one in Houston.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't say too much because it's
Okay.
still on the stage, and it'll not only be me, it would be Daryl Triplett, whom I introduce you to,
Wonderful.
uh, uh, Lars
Ah,
will be there,
yes. Great
and
man.
yes, and there's another young artist who is also lives in Houston, will be there also. So we are hoping to get that up and going in the early part of the fall. So
Okay.
I'll stay in contact with you and let you know when we're coming back to Houston.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'll make sure I update everyone because oh my goodness, that is the company of greatness. I cannot miss that opportunity. Oh, that's so wonderful. And I think what people want to know is, can we purchase your art?
Yes, without constant purchasing, we would not be having this conversation. So yes, you may. Um, we 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 have numbers of pieces that we offer for sale and
Okay.
originals, and we also do G clays of many of the pieces, and we have small pieces for two reasons. We love doing small pieces, and people who collected already don't have any room for large ones. Uh,
Hmm.
so yes, we have um, opportunities for people to own my work.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Well, as soon as you get the website up, I will definitely make that available to the public as well, so that they can contact you and so that people can get this beautiful art. And I pray that I'm able to acquire a piece that I will just stare at for every single day. I just cannot wait. So thank you again. Thank you. You're so
thank
wonderful.
you.
You're
Thank
such a
you.
blessing in my life and to everyone I'm sure that you come in contact with. So may God continue to expound you greatly.
Thank you, and bless you.
Yes, sir. And for those listening, make sure that you follow me at my website at www.cortinajackson.com. I'm on Facebook at On Earth as It Is in Hell. Instagram at Miss Tina, that's MISS Tina underscore the writer. I'm on Twitter at Tina the Writer, and I'm on LinkedIn at my name, Cortina Jackson. And so this has been What's on Cortina Jackson's Mind. And I'll tell you what's on my mind, the greatness of wonderful people. And I'm so blessed. So thank you all, and we will see you next time. God bless.
Bless you.
You too, sir.